Izuku Midoriya was born differently. Born a different type of person. When he was born in a lab that was interested in the study of quirks. But when he was born and they saw that he was quirkless, a problem definitely allied. But in a way, a solution was right in front of them. They had somebody that was quirkless, that did not have the gene to get a quirk or have a quirk. Now they could use that, maybe use that to actually gift this person something stronger than a quirk. In the military, they've been experimenting with serums and various other techniques to make a stronger super soldier. They've done this in the past a long time ago, but that project erupted in flames. Something occurred and it basically went down, well, like I said, in flames. But luckily, they have something else in mind. They want to make a soldier that is the weapon, that they are the weapon alone, built within the body of, well, that person could be a lethal amount of strength and a lethal amount of, well, hostility. There might be a way to make this kid into a super soldier. So that's what they begin to try. The mother of this child would be pulled away from him in a matter of seconds. She would be subdued and put away, and, well, let's just say there's a good chance she was killed. Fighting for her little boy to be normal, well, they ran out of options and had to put her down. Of course, Izuku would have no idea what's going on at all. Izuku would be lost in what's happening. He only knew the superhuman training. That's all he remembered, and that's all he would know. But soon, he would forget so much so quickly. At the age of only 5, they began injecting him with this serum. A serum that would embed itself very similar to a quirk. It would not stunt the growth of Izuku, and it would only be a positive in the future. Or at least that's what everyone believed. They were making him into a super soldier, into something that could be put on the front lines in front of any hero or villain. That's the problem, right? They don't know if they truly have control over all these heroes. Because what happens if All Might goes rogue? What happens when the strongest heroes on the planet go rogue? What do? What can they do? They begin to experiment more on Izuku Midoriya, changing his genetics so much so that it began to change to the point that he would have extreme amounts of a healing factor. On top of that, superhuman strength, and they began to embed him with his own weapon, claws that were these blades within his own skin that could be pushed out and retracted back within his own arms, and healed right back up because of his healing factor. They began to test multiple amounts of metals, many of them, anything that they can possibly think of. Eventually, they would find this special type of metal or a substance known as adamantium. This would be embedded in his entire body throughout his entire life, beginning to merge with his skeletal structure, and on top of that, giving him the Wolverine claws that they so sought after. Of course, Izuku would be in extreme agony. They would have to subdue him, put him under, and basically place him under stasis for such a long time, for years. Years would pass on. He would go from the age of about 8 to 9 to 10 to 12 to 15 years old as super fast. The fact that this pain was almost unbearable for a teenager made sense. But soon his body would adapt, would change, and would eventually overcome the pain that he currently feels. He would begin his training, the training that would make him and mold him into a weapon of ultimate destruction. But during this training, he began to pick up on things. They wanted to keep Izuku Midoriya as down in terms of intelligence as possible. Controlling a wild beast was far easier than controlling an intelligent one. So they tried to keep him down. But there were mothers and fathers and many other people that were currently there that were helping Izuku and helping many others that were there as well. Izuku didn't really speak with any of these other test subjects, but he would find out that they do exist from people that are currently there. Izuku would build his knowledge slowly but surely, but he would still be a rash and, quick to the trigger type of person. He would be more on the side of this animalistic type of person, but he would make sure to maintain that as much as possible while he learns what's happening on the outside and what's happening in general. Izuku would begin to pick up on certain cues, certain things in general, and he would realize certain things that were not right, or that were wrong, and what was happening inside and out of everything going on. He would eventually learn of the kids that were also being experimented on, the experiments that he went through all these years, and the nightmares that he still has, glimpses of his mother being stripped away, and on top of that, many other things that terrify him during the night. There's something that's boiling within Izuku. Izuku keeps getting mentioned to as the Wolverine, or codename Project Wolverine, as if he is some sort of monster. A monster that used to prowl the earth, that used to tear people apart and eat them alive. The Wolverine was a monstrous creature back in the day, and it was, territorial at that. Izuku felt as if he was, exactly that, a monster, a project. So maybe he wanted to do something good for once, for one time. Well, he'll get that chance. And that chance would open up when he would see a door nearby that had a small hole in it. He would look through it to see that there was more and more doors, and he could hear the voices of other kids wanting to get out. It's as if he could feel their pain. In a matter of seconds, he would turn, slicing through two of the guards that were next to him, smashing through the door. He would cut loose all of these doors as they would open up. Various children that have powers that are similar to his, or might be so drastically different that they seemed as if they were quirks themselves, but they weren't. They were different than just quirks, far more powerful, a mutation that was beyond just a regular quirk, a mutation that has been developed using a serum and various other things within these children to make sure that the evolution of quirks in the near future, in the next 100 years or so, they can be maintained. But these children were being tortured. They were being put under immense stress and pressure, so Izuku was able to get them out. And as they all ran out and left, multiples of these so-called pseudo-parents would basically help them leave. The nurses, the nurses all alike, the doctors, nurses, and stuff like that, would help them get away. And eventually they would leave, but Izuku would be caught. He would feel this immense electricity flow through his head as if he was getting stunned to the ground. He'd be dragged away and he would try to get out, but he couldn't. There was no way for him to leave. But at least he would know that they escaped properly. But he would soon forget all about that. He would only see nightmares of these children that existed, and during this time, he would ask about it, and they would say that there is no such thing that exists. He's the only one that's here, and beginning to basically be controlled by these dreams. These dreams alone were basically being denounced as fake to Izuku, but Izuku for some reason felt like they could be real. But nonetheless, he couldn't do anything about it, and they began to treat Izuku literally like basically a tamed animal. They began shock therapy and many other things as well, putting a headset on Izuku, enabling this electrotherapy that would control him overall. But what they wouldn't believe would eventually happen is Izuku would disappear. Not on his own fruition and not on his own will, Izuku did not escape. Someone swooped him up. Immediately, they would all be freaking out, wondering where their masterpiece went, basically worrying that if this person, if Izuku was put into the wrong hands, if Code Project named Wolverine was in the wrong hands, everything could go downhill and everything could crumble. And what they didn't realize is that's exactly what was going to happen. Izuku was exactly in the wrong hands, in the hands of somebody that many knew as the most terrifying villain in Japan, maybe even in the entire world. Someone, a villain, that their reach extended all across the globe, and his name was All For One, a direct antagonist to All Might himself and whatever All Might stands for. All For One has captured Izuku, taking him away to the scientist lab, and they begin to actually continue experiments on his body and on Izuku's mind. Soon, his mind would open up. It would eventually show many dreams and thoughts and things that Izuku has done so far, and All For One is pretty surprised. It seems like this kid was raised to be animalistic, raised to be controlled easily, but he wasn't controlled easily. It seems as if he was slowly but surely molding his own brain into something that could counteract the animalistic nature that they were embedding in his brain. Soon, the experiments on Izuku would take its toll, and obviously All For One would begin to reveal himself as someone that is in a good place of standing with Izuku, making it seem as if Izuku and All For One share some sort of family tie, maybe a father and son type of mantra. Not so sure to the extent, or Izuku won't be sure to the extent, but that is what is being revealed. Izuku would eventually be introduced into the League of Villains. He's not really in his own mind, he's been transferred into someone far different, and it was far easier to do it in the regard of Izuku than actually Kurogiri, for the fact that, well, Kurogiri has his own, let's just say, past and future. Kurogiri already went through so much in general that it was so difficult to actually make his mind bend to where they wanted it. Izuku's mind was kind of like a blank slate. It was already enough for them to bend and change, but it actually didn't take as long, and they didn't spend as much time, nowhere near as much time, actually bending his mind. After all of this was said and done, he was now finally, well, a piece of Shigaraki's team, a piece of the LOV, and this would be perfect, because soon there was something that was just in reach. An invasion on the USJ was something that they really, really wanted to fulfill, something that they felt needed to be fulfilled. The death of All Might, the symbol of peace, the number one hero. That is who they wanted to kill. That is who they wanted to eliminate. So their next steps would be just that. They'd be headed over to the USJ in a plan of more or less attacking the USJ and everybody that's present, including All Might. Or at least that's who they thought would be there at that time. They would get ready. Him, or Izuku, Kurogiri, Anomu, Shigaraki, and many other villains that were ready to sacrifice their lives in the name of All For One, and the death of all these other heroes would then be ready for their attack on the USJ. The time would come and the portals would open. They would basically scramble the radio system so that nobody could get in or get out, or be basically allowed to signal anything out of the USJ. And when they arrive, Izuku would show up in an outfit that was found when All For One found him. It was an odd one that had yellow all over it, but at the same time had yellow, black, blue, and it seemed to fit very similar to, well, an animal of some sorts, a prehistoric animal of some sorts. He would be wearing this odd coloring of a Wolverine. It seemed as if it matched kind of a weird color scheme of some Wolverines that were out there in the past, in prehistoric times. And he would appear through a portal, staring out into what his mission was known as. He would be told by All For One that his mission was to protect Shigaraki and to eliminate All Might. That's what he needed to do, and that's what his goal was. All For One realized something, that Izuku was powerful. His strength was beyond anything he's really ever seen in his life. His skeletal structure was even different than that of humans. It was as if he was the epitome of what a Quark could be hundreds of years down the line. He knew that he would be perfect for this job. Izuku would wait, and he would protect Shigaraki as well. He watched as the other villains would fall victim to Aizawa or Eraserhead. Eraserhead would absolutely destroy everyone there, but as he got to, well, the Wolverine or Izuku Midoriya, that fight was far different. He tried to cancel the quirk of Izuku, but there was no quirk to cancel. Izuku would show off his adamantium claws as he walks forward with a growl or a scowl on his face. He began to feel animalistic as he charges toward Aizawa and immediately plunges his claws into the side of Aizawa, being barely able to dodge, just centimeters away from a crucial and, well, life-ending blow. Izuku would toss him toward the wall as he slams into it, bleeding like crazy. Izuku would put his claws back within his hands, and he would go back to protecting Shigaraki. Shigaraki would tell him that he could finish him off, but he tells Shigaraki that that is not his job detail. His detail is to protect him and end the life of All Might. That is his detail. Immediately as All Might arrives, Izuku would extract his claws once again, and Shigaraki would tell him that he guesses that it's time for him to do his job and follow the mission like a good soldier. As Izuku hears this, he sees flashes of different scenarios. He sees flashes of different things that he's seen and gone through throughout this time. He sees that military base that was experimenting on him, and on top of that, he sees various different things. He sees all of the people that he saved or cut loose, and he hears the military people and scientists talking about him being a perfect soldier, a warrior, a monster, an animalistic creature that basically follows the lines of old human animalistic ideals, but also has the technology and strength built within him as if he has a quirk in the society that they live in now. A perfect creature, a perfect soldier. That's exactly what he is. Flashes of seeing this and hearing this begin to bring back memories he couldn't remember, but at the same time they would get pushed back to the back of his head once again as his claws would basically extract further out of his hands. All Might would come charging in, and immediately they would go blow for blow. All Might obviously having to dodge the claws, these adamantium claws, basically because any blow would be crucial and brutal. As he would get struck in the legs and the arms here and there, All Might would still be able to relatively keep up with the speed. But every blow that the Wolverine or Izuku would take, it seems to be regenerated and shrugged off. As All Might felt that maybe, just maybe, he could get some sort of advantage using the quirks and specialties of these other kids that are around that may be able to help, like Shoto Todoroki, Katsuki Bakugo, and many others. Just as he thought that might give him an advantage, he was wrong, because a Nomu, a monstrous creature that had regenerative powers and that was built to kill All Might, is also here. Who is this other person? This monstrous creature and this other Wolverine-like guy? this guy, he's like an animal. They're both like animalistic creatures that have no minds at all. All Might would try to fight them off, and of course anybody else that's still up and ready to go tries to help as well. But at the end of the day, All Might would be drained entirely. He would be on the floor gasping for air, and even the people, the kids there would see All Might in his Small Might form. They would be in shock. This would immediately have everybody, all the kids and everybody alike, would help out, would try to help and protect All Might, at least until the others get here, at least until Tenya comes back with reinforcements. And luckily, since everyone stepped up and everyone basically put their lives on the line, the reinforcements eventually came. Those reinforcements would force the villains to slightly scramble, because they would injure Shigaraki brutally at that, with multiple bullets in his legs and arms. But they would also do the same to Izuku, shooting him like crazy. But Izuku has one mission, and that mission is to kill All Might. They begin to retreat, and portals begin to form to get him out of there. But Izuku would dive toward All Might and slice into his chest, killing him. Izuku would end the life of All Might. And as he does this, many heroes would begin striking toward him. Every hero that's there tries to push him off of All Might in hopes that they can get to him to hopefully save his life. But there is no saving his life. The blades cut too deep, cut too within, and on impact, the life of All Might was taken away from him. Izuku was gone within a portal, including the Nomu. So there was no information they possibly could give, and there was no information they possibly could get. And let's just say the villains, bar none, have won this time. The villains did exactly what they wanted. They ended All Might's life, and Izuku was the perfect soldier to do so. Izuku would get back to the League of Villains base while Shigaraki begins to heal up. He would get his compliments, his flowers, of course. All for One would tell him that he did a hell of a job, an amazing job. He ended All Might's, and he even accelerated the plans further past that he could possibly imagine. Now that the word will get around that All Might has been slain, and that some monstrous creature, some animalistic soldier did it, is something that is going to bring them down. All for One knows exactly where Izuku comes from. And the fact that he comes from a military within Japan, and on top of that, there was association with the hero agent, or with basically hero society within that's something that will be outspoken and sent around. The word of Izuku, of what he is and what he became, will spread like wildfire. But what about those other children, some even near the age, maybe even older than Izuku, that have powers as well? Powers that are supposed to be stronger than Quark's. All for One begins to think about this, begins to think about how strong these mutant genes really are, and if he got all the rest of them, how strong could they truly be? A Quark is simple maybe, but this mutant gene is as if it's a Quark, but it's accelerated for hundreds of years. Now if he got all of them, every last experiment, he could truly accelerate the process of becoming the ultimate being, can truly accelerate the process of being on top, controlling everything. He never knew this would be possible. He never knew that even the military would guide him in this direction. He never knew that simple beings like them, simple humans that think so small, so minuscule, would come up with such a major component in this game that he's currently playing. The chess pieces are all on the board. He has multiple steps ahead of the heroes. Now the heroes will be on the back foot. Now the heroes will need to figure out their next course of action because frankly, they might not have any. They might not even have a chance in this war. They now accelerated everything and now have put themselves in a position of ultimate domination. All for One would smile at what's ahead of him and would smile at the fact that he has something even stronger than just a Nomu, even stronger than what Kurogiri became, a more perfected Nomu. He has a perfect type of Nomu, a perfect soldier. Izuku Midoriya, Wolverine. Project Wolverine has now become Project Takeover. The takeover for all villains that work for All for One, for all villains that want to be free and want to do whatever they want. And All for One will be at the head of it all. All for One, the League of Villains, and everyone else that decides not to follow will fall in his wake. Izuku has seemingly done the impossible. It seems with the addition of Izuku Midoriya, or who they deem as the Wolverine, ended the existence of the number one hero, All Might. News would begin to spread throughout Japan. All Might has died. But of course, they keep it under wraps, saying that he passed of natural causes, that the quirk that he once held drained him so deeply that he eventually petered off and passed away. But they all know exactly what happened. The heroes know exactly what happened. Now everyone feels as if they are in an extreme or extremely weakened state. A state that they feel they may never get out of. And that's something they'll definitely have to think about. The heroes are now on the back foot, are now in a position of, let's just say, extreme deficit. Since All for One and the League of Villains know this, they're not going to necessarily attack the heroes. They want to attack some other villains or get them on their side. This would lead to an interaction with Overhaul. Overhaul is someone that they need to speak with and learn a little bit more about. The League of Villains would then go out with a Nomu at hand just in case to speak with Overhaul. But Izuku has a different mission. Izuku is left right here. Izuku is left with All for One and a couple others that are going to help out. More like a couple scientists that are going to help out. They begin to speak with Izuku, telling him that there's going to be something that they're going to do for him. That All for One wants Izuku to be the next in line for his quirk. Izuku is obviously shocked to hear this. At the same time, not really. He's a perfect prototype for not only multiple quirks, but also for All for One. But for now, they just want to embed him with as many quirks as possible. Quirks that would enhance his power, enhance his strength, and on top of that, his regenerative powers would allow so much more if tested properly. They begin to extract DNA out of Izuku on top of it to see if they can replicate the regenerative powers that he currently holds within him, maybe giving it to All for One himself. Maybe that can regenerate what he once lost. With that thought in mind, the experiments would continue on, and Izuku would gain powers beyond comprehension. During this time, of course, the rest of the League of Villains are handling, Overhaul. Or at least trying to get Overhaul to their side, maybe have some leeway, but that isn't necessarily going the best, course of action, and not going the best way they really think it could. But with that said, that's not the problem of All for One, and that's not the problem of Izuku Midoriya. The issue that they're going to run into, or at least what they believe needs to be done, is they need an army. An army. Now, where could they get this army? In the eyes of Izuku, he only has been taking orders. That's about it. He doesn't really know what else is going on in the world, so he's sent, with All For One in fact, to an interesting place. A place that looks like an abandoned city, but it's actually full of quirk users that believe that they should have free reign to do whatever they want. They abide by the rules of a lot of other people, and they're so in sync that they have, well, practically hundreds and maybe thousands of people on their side that are in perfect unison when using these quirks. Izuku would arrive with All For One, and All For One would basically greet all of these people as they practically surround them with numbers hundreds of times greater than what Izuku and All For One obviously currently are right now. And All For One, using his words of wisdom and magical words, frankly, he begins to speak to all of them, telling them what he seeks, what he wants, what he's after. And of course, initially this doesn't work so well. This doesn't go flawlessly, but that's fine. That is completely and utterly fine. The reason for this is they not only got one backup plan, but they got two of them. First off is Izuku. Izuku begins to mow down everybody, making sure he doesn't kill them on the orders of All For One, knocking them out relatively easily. We're talking about Izuku is a one-man army and a one-man wrecking crew with quirks that are allowing him to fly, allowing him to have projectiles, and so on and so forth. He is eliminating, or at least knocking out, the army in a matter of seconds. The army falls very quickly. Izuku stands over all of them as All For One begins to speak once again as the big bad boss, Redestro, arrives. He begins to basically get everybody around back to their feet, injured of all hell, but they still stand. They believe in their leader and they want to stand with him, but out of nowhere they collapse to the ground once again. Izuku irradiating this terrifying aspects of him as if it's some sort of relentless prowl that he's just emanating beyond out or outside of his body, forcing all of them to the ground. They're terrified of the Wolverine, terrified of Izuku. All For One speaks once again, laying out his entire plan, laying out exactly what's going to happen. This world deserves better. All Might All Might is gone. All For One wants to give them that. Eventually, with some persuasion and, well, with their little secret weapon Izuku, it's not too hard to sway them in the right direction, and eventually the League of Villains now has their army. On top of that, they didn't even have to show their second weapon in mind, and which All For One is pleased about. He thought maybe Izuku would need some help, but it seems like with the quirks added on to him and, well, all that extra power, it seems that he was ready to go. And he was ready to make that stance. But what's happening with the heroes? Of course, normally, the heroes are trying to recover. The heroes are trying to figure out a way to stop everything, and they realize something. They found about 10 to 12 people, various ages, from 15 to 18 to some children even around the age of 12. They saw them near the border, about to leave on a boat. They bring them back in, and they begin to question what's going on, and they even run some tests. These children don't have quirks, but they have extraordinary powers. Powers that are insane. Powers that seem to be the evolution of a quirk. Now this is odd. Why do they not have quirks, but they have powers that are just like them, but stronger? Well, these are the escaped mutants. They're all test subjects of the government, and they fell right into the lap of Hero Society, and maybe, just maybe, they can allow Hero Society to get some sort of leg up. They begin to train these kids to strengthen themselves, gain power. But there's a difference between them and the Wolverine. The Wolverine is just a mechanism. He is a all-powerful being that is being controlled like a puppet. Someone that's going to walk down, eliminate whoever All For One points at, and will end everything. With that said, Izuku is back in the League of Villains base. Eventually, over the intercom, they hear that the little meeting with Overhaul went south, and that now it's going to be up front, just a brutal brawl with Overhaul. And of course, Shigaraki and many others struggle to a certain extent, struggle in a way. But once Izuku arrives, and on top of Izuku arriving, Gigantomachia arriving, it's over. Overhaul would be cut down by Izuku in a matter of seconds, and Izuku would hear a slight whimpering from behind a dresser of some sorts. He would walk over and in a blank stare would see a little girl. He would grab the little girl, carrying her off. But it was odd. Izuku was nice, well-mannered. He wasn't rough at all. He wasn't, he wasn't mean by any means. He brought the girl to where All For One and the League of Villains currently were after eliminating the Shiahazaikai, and he begins to set her down, making sure that she's safe, and they even have doctors check on her. All For One is shocked. She's so powerful. Her strength is limitless. It's insane, incredible. He's actually in complete and utter awe. Of course, Izuku has a bit of a soft spot, especially it's because it's a child. And All For One sees this. He doesn't see this as a threat by any means, but he does want to put the image that All For One, or himself, is a good person. So he decides to take care of this little girl, a girl by the name of Eri, building her up, keeping her safe, and making it so that she sees the good side, quote unquote, of what they're building. They're building an empire, building somewhere that she'll be safe always, no matter what. Heroes won't fail, villains won't kill, he'll control everything. Everything will be safe, a paradise. That's what he's building. That's what All For One is making. Of course, Eri, being just a child, she has no clue if this is true, if this is false, but this big person in Izuku and All For One has saved her and is now taking care of her. So what is she going to argue about? She thinks this is great. She thinks that maybe these people do really care about her. And to an extent, All For One does. But it's for his own ways, his own malicious ways. He knows that he needs advantages, and these advantages are in front of him. Eventually, we would lead, finally, to war. War is something that's been getting set up right in front of them, and it happens far, far sooner. And that means every hero needs to be ready far, far sooner. The heroes have been building, have been creating, and have been waiting. It seems that Izuku is not the only, basically not the only project or not the only secret weapon that they have up their sleeve. It seems the heroes have some weapons of their own, have some things to take advantage of. In 2 days' time, Izuku, All For One, Shigaraki, the League of Villains, and many others will take on the heroes, will walk forward and absolutely flatten Hero Society in Japan for the first time ever. All For One will see the brightest day that he's seen in a long time. Something he's been searching for forever. But What will happen when Izuku goes face to face with the mutants that he saved, the ones he allowed to escape? Will that be enough to get him out of this brainwashing? Or has he been brainwashed so much throughout his life that all he is now is an empty weapon? A Wolverine that is controlled by the scariest and arguably strongest villain, not only in Japan, but the entire world. Izuku Midoriya is more than just himself now. Izuku Midoriya has changed a far bit from the very beginning. In the beginning, he might have been some sort of military weapon, someone that was bred for combat. But now, he's utilized in a far different way. Combat might be one of the reasons, but it seems that All For One has a bigger and better plan for Izuku than the military ever had. All For One's plan is domination, world domination, but it all starts with Japan. A war would ensue far quicker than anyone could possibly imagine, and that war would be fronted by Izuku. But there would be something hidden far, far away, a secret weapon in fact, right for the heroes. The heroes may have gotten their weapons on a stroke of luck. Izuku would face down the heroes, including many other villains. Izuku would lead the charge with Shigaraki close by, Gigantomachia, and many others, monstrous creatures that are ready for a fight. But Izuku wouldn't believe what he saw when he sees the same people he saved years ago. The same people that he wanted to be safe, to be put away, and to never have to deal with this ever again. But that Izuku that saved them back then was a different Izuku. An Izuku that didn't have his brain tampered by All For One. An Izuku that's basically has been changed to the point where he's not necessarily a mindless beast. He's actually a beast that is tame. A beast that has his own outlooks changed to the fact that it now aligns with All For One's. So when the armies come knocking and Izuku comes out to fight, well, let's just say that these mutants that are standing in front of him may give him some weird flashbacks, but they do not change what Izuku is deep inside. Izuku is a tamed monster, a leash around his neck by All For One, but at the same time, All For One has convinced him of freedom, that he is free, but he's not necessarily. But still, Izuku knows that All For One is the one that was loyal to him. So how could he ever betray his quote-unquote master? He wouldn't. He would never. Izuku begins going head-on with the likes of Endeavor, with the likes of Mirio Togata, or other known as Lemillion. And then on top of that, mutants that have similar but different powers to him. Mutants that have, well, laser eye vision to actually regeneration, storm-like powers, and many other things, etc., and so on and so forth. These powers do put up a fight, but Izuku and his powers are far greater than they can possibly imagine. With advanced quirks like regenerative powers, with his adamantium claws and the adamantium metal blending with his body, intertwined with his bones, and on top of that, with countless quirks pumping through his veins, allowing him to be something and someone else that they couldn't even possibly imagine. Let's just say this fight isn't fair. Even with the training that these so-called mutants got, it didn't matter. Izuku was so far ahead, so much so that it was complete and utter domination. The new number one hero in Endeavor would fall, and then so on and so forth. Hawks would be next. and many would fall after him. People like Mirako, people like Gang Orca, they would quickly fall to Izuku, and they could do nothing about it. The villains seem to be winning this battle and seem to be on top, and it felt as if there was no hope for the heroes. No hope at all. But hope, just that sliver, would come back when jets would begin to sound miles away, but begin to increase the sounds as they basically come in hot. The jets begin to fly in, and this right here was reinforcements that came early from the US or from America. The reason for this is that All Might is already dead and gone, and there's somebody wanting to knock on the door to make sure that this ends now. And her name is Star and Stripe. The #1 hero of America has arrived. This #1 hero of America is standing face to face with Izuku, someone that is as strong, maybe stronger than her, but at the same time, she knows things that he doesn't. She found out who he was, what he is, and exactly what she needs to do. And that is to end his life. The only way. She begins to manipulate things and makes it so that the man or the boy by the name of Izuku Midoriya would be killed if he moved an inch. In hindsight, this was a great idea. In hindsight, this was the only way that it would work. But Izuku would move forward as if nothing was happening. She was shocked. How could this be possible? How could this be occurring? But then she thinks, his regenerative powers must be that insane? She changes it. The man by the name of Izuku Midoriya, well, if he moves, his heart may stop. As she does this, setting a new order, nothing works. She begins to think that this is crazy. He must be invincible, but that's not true. Izuku's heart is stopping, but coming back alive at the same time, as if all the quirks and every single bit of his power is reviving his heart every time it stops to shut down. This is a scary, scary aspect. But even Star and Stripe knows that this will take a sacrifice. This will take everything that she has. She allows herself basically to be killed, to the point that she then combines her own quirk with Izuku. It's odd. It's as if she set in a world order as a failsafe to stop him. As she does this, the body, or her own body and quirk, begin to basically consume Izuku, counteracting the regeneration, and on top of that, using the quirks against him. It's as if it's eroding his body over and over again. Shigaraki is watching all of this kind of in complete and utter shock, believing that maybe Izuku wasn't as strong as they believed, and it seems that he's going to fall. But just as this is occurring, just as Izuku is struggling through nightmarish amounts of pain, Izuku sees everything, sees where he came from, sees the people that he saved, remembers how he got here. All his memories begin to be rushed back. All the memories that were from before begin to flood back. Was this exactly what Star and Stripe wanted to do? She read everything about Izuku, heard the things about the military, what they did to him, and what occurred, who he was, what he was. Was she attacking his quirks? Was she ripping him from the inside out? Or was she making him remember? Now this is something they won't be able to ask her, because unfortunately this took a sacrifice that would lead to her death. But when Izuku struggles back and is still alive, someone else shows up. All for One. All for One is standing there menacingly. Terrifying creature. The heroes believe it's over. For those who are alive, For those who aren't completely crippled, they look on to see that it's him. He's back, alive, well, and ready to conquer. Something terrifying, shooting shivers down everyone's spines. How could this be? How is he back? How did this happen? But nothing is said. Nothing, not even a word. But just as All For One is about to walk over to Izuku, Izuku is in front of him, appearing in front of him, slicing All For One's body into little chunks. This shocks everyone, shocks Shigaraki, but just as Shigaraki is about to do something as well, he grabs Shigaraki and drags him right in front of All For One, grabbing him by the hand as he places Shigaraki's hand on All For One's skin, forcibly forcing his quirk to activate. Izuku knows that All For One has some sort of basically regeneration, very similar to his own. But what happens when his whole body disintegrates and it begins to reject his regeneration, just like how his adamantium does within his own skin? Izuku does just this, interacting the adamantium with All For One's body, on top of using Shigaraki's own quirk against him to disintegrate All For One. The heroes watch on in awe and in complete shock. The mutants that are alive, or at least the ones that aren't completely crippled and out cold, are watching on in awe as well. Is he back? Is he the same person that they saw that saved them all those years ago? How is it even possible? What even happened for this to occur? Well, all it took was the number one hero in America to sacrifice her life to wake him up. That's what he heard. It was the wake-up call that Izuku needed to actually think on his own. Now Izuku is a different person. Izuku is no longer the tamed beast, the tamed monster that they wanted, the tamed monster that they made. He's no longer that. He is the Wolverine. He shreds through all of the villains, not knowing necessarily whose side he truly is on, but now he knows that these decisions are his own. He cuts them down in a matter of minutes. All For One officially dead and gone. Even the regenerative powers that he's gotten from Izuku weren't fully established just quite yet, so he was killed. Now what about everyone else? Well, they fall as quick as they stood. Dead and gone. The villains seem to be losing now, quickly losing this war, and that's exactly what happens. This war was far different than anyone could possibly imagine. This war was no longer hero versus villain. This was a war of a monster. Bloodshed was insane, immense, and something they wouldn't even believe. This war led to far different things in this world. For a long time, everyone believed it to be heroes versus villains, but quickly they realized that it wasn't so clear-cut. Izuku made this a reality. Izuku made them realize this, that just because they have these little labels, a label of a hero, a label of a villain, doesn't mean that to be true. Izuku is no villain. Izuku is no hero. Izuku is a monster. The Wolverine has arrived, has slayed everything that he believed to be, or believed that needed to be done. And in a way, quote unquote, the heroes won. But did they really? They lost so many, so quickly. And, well, how can you punish Izuku Midoriya? How can you punish the Wolverine when you couldn't even stop him in the first place? The war calms down, the sun begins to shine once again, but on a day like this, well, let's just say it doesn't feel very, well, sunny. A dark cloud over their own heads begins to swell. How could they let this occur? Hero society has been put in a dark place. A dent, in fact. Maybe All For One did succeed. Maybe All For One may not have the control that he wanted, but he did send ripples down Hero Society forever. He changed Hero Society forever. Now everyone will question, what is a hero? What is a villain? And are we all just monsters? With that said, the rest of society may change forever, but that is a story for another day. So I hope y'all enjoyed. And if you did, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a sub, and make sure to leave a comment down below. And I hope y'all enjoyed What If Deku Was Wolverine. And I know this was definitely a different spin on the What If Deku Was Wolverine than you probably were thinking. He's not necessarily the Wolverine maybe you know in the comics and stuff like that, but very similar. I kind of adapted it to My Hero Academia, as y'all could tell, and I've said it before. That's what my plan was. As always, though, I hope y'all enjoyed, and I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.